Hey, good morning. And thank you for turning up after the free beer last night. I found various beer tokens scattered around my room this morning, so clearly I was responsible and didn't get all of it. This is developing people, and there are a number of things that I want to say before this talk. First of all, it's Halloween, so this is kind of a Halloween edition of the talk. And secondly, I've given a similar talk before, so this was an opportunity to come back and revisit it. So I'm kind of referring to this as my director's cut. If it's good, you can consider this like the Apocalypse Now Redux, where it's kind of been improved. If it's bad, then think of me as George Lucas revisiting Star Wars and ruining your childhood. But let's jump in. So some big philosophical questions to start with. I don't know if anyone already got to this point last night where you start looking at how you can solve all the world's problems if you can just have one more drink, but this might be a little bit heavy for the morning. So I'll try and keep it simple. It's kind of, who am I and why am I here? Some logistics first. If you want to find me on the internet, then these are the various locations you can do it. You can find me on Twitter. There's my blog, which if enough of you go and look at it, I might feel guilty enough to update it. You can also find me on Joined In. Please feel free to leave comments in German on there. I can use Google Translate to work out what you're saying afterwards. And likewise on Google Plus as well, if you want to come and talk to me there. What are we going to talk about today? Who's heard the term growth hacking? Okay. Good. Growth hacking is kind of, as far as I can tell, it's a sort of Silicon Valley startup kind of mentality thing. So I looked up some definitions, and this is what I believe growth hacking to be. We are going to take our team of developers, and we are going to chop them up into little bits, and we're going to take our favorite parts of those developers, and we're going to build a better developer out of those pieces. So when we talk about growth hacking, that's what we're doing. That's also why often we need to hire more developers, because we've built some really good ones, but now we just have a load of spare parts left over. Okay, so here's where we're going to begin. This is our average developer, and he's very sad. He's sad for a number of reasons. He has no hair, he's a good set of abs, though, but is missing some other things that people might generally enjoy having. So we're going to try and find some ways to improve this guy through the talk. We have an inspirational quote here of, "Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away." So there will still be some original bits of our developer left at the end. I know that whenever I come to conferences like this, I generally end up leaving the conference feeling kind of stupid because I've met a whole bunch of people who turn out to be really smart and really good at stuff. And then when I get back in, I always kind of think to myself, how am I even in this job? Surely someone's going to find out I know nothing at some point. But there is good stuff about you, so you don't have to take everything away. But at the same time as well, you don't need to try and become this superhero who knows absolutely everything. That's the other danger when you go along to something like this and you meet people who have written their own framework, had their own startup, sold it, made $1 million, and they did all of this, before breakfast, and now they're coming up to give a talk. It can be a little dangerous if you try and try and bite off more than you can chew in one go. So don't believe that you need to be this perfect developer who can take care of everything. Not only are you going to fail by not being the best at everything, but worse than that, you're going to burn out, and when you have a nervous breakdown and wander out of the office tearing all your clothes off and setting fire to the computers, then you are also taking the rest of the team down with you, and possibly the project and the work and so on. So set realistic goals and just look at small things that you can improve over time, rather than attempting an entire transformation. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into chopping up our developer and adding some new parts in here. The other thing about this talk as well is, and I appreciate it's still early, it's kind of an exploration of the culture and references of my childhood, which mostly meant I grew up watching obscure movies and playing weird games. So I'm going to show you, every so often, a body part. And feel free, if you recognize where it's from, to just shout out where that body part comes from. Anyone think they'll do this? Yeah, no, you all seem very reserved. Okay. We'll start with tools first. So one of the things that we often strive for in the apps that we build or the services that we provide is to create simplistic, intuitive interfaces. We all know that our users are never going to read the documentation or the manuals that we provide. They just want to open up the app or visit the site, and they want to know what to do with it as soon as they land there. When you are a professional using a tool, this is a different story. You have tools that are difficult to use and require training to use because they are more powerful, and you need to invest your time in understanding how to use those tools properly. So what we have here is a hand that has 6 fingers on it. Does this ring any bells with anyone?
Princess Bride.
Yes, thank you. Okay, good. So the Princess Bride, and also I can provide a list of all of these references afterwards, and you can go and watch these various films and read these books and play these games. And then next time I can give this talk, and you will laugh at all the bits that are hilarious. So this is from the character Count Rugen, and he has 6 fingers on his hand. Now the reason that he has 6 fingers on his hand, actually this works a lot better if you haven't seen the movie, because you'll probably just believe me. This is a condition known as Emacs hand, because he needs these additional fingers to do things like save a file or copy something into a new buffer. Oh yes, this is the other thing I should have perhaps mentioned about this talk. These are my opinions, and I have decided that I'm very definitely going to be opinionated so that afterwards you can find me and you can tell me how wrong I am about these various things and how Emacs does not require 6 fingers to use it, because you can still have 5 fingers and just use your nose for shortcuts. So what's the message here? What's the important thing? Why is it valuable to have 6 fingers to use your editor? So I'll take a little sidetrack here. Who knows the author Neil Stephenson? Okay. So he's written some very good books, like Snow Crash is a kind of cyberpunk-based one. He's done The Diamond Age, which is really cool, sort of futuristic world where like 3D printing and molecular manipulation is standard. But he also does some really good sort of essays and articles as well. There's In the Beginning was the Command Line. Now, the whole hog comes from a reminiscence of a job that he had during a summer holiday when he was a student. And he was working on a building site, and they had this drill there that they called the whole hog. And this drill was basically just a metal box that had a hole in one side where you put the drill bit, and then it had a sort of a handle on the other side which you could do something like put a piece of metal through to brace it. And it had a button. And when you pressed the button, it started drilling. And it would not stop drilling until you stopped pressing the button. And it would drill through anything. There were no safety measures, there were no kind of automatic cutoffs. People would get their arm broken if they hadn't braced themselves properly when they started the drill and realized that the drill was actually more powerful than them and would move them around rather than necessarily drilling through the thing that they wanted. But the point is, and this is just an extract from this, is you started to respect and almost fear the tool that you were using, because you knew that you needed to have that skill built in to make it work. So he's saying that he never blamed the whole hog for being difficult to use. He blamed himself. And also that leads to the kind of, I'm sure we're probably all used to this, where you've seen the sort of slightly superior attitude that sometimes developers get, where if someone tells you that they say, let's say, built their site with front page, or are currently running their business off of an access database, then you start to think to yourself, well, these aren't real tools, these are toys. But this is the kind of point of making sure that when you go and get one of these tools that they use, it should be part of you, it should be like a reflex. You should innately know how to use that tool and how to make the best use of it. Now, if you don't have 6 fingers and therefore are precluded from becoming an Emacs user, there is another editor that you can make use of. I'm not biased towards this, I'm just using this as a random example of an editor that's out there. Now, something that Vim includes is if you open up Vim for the first time, then it follows the very sort of Unix tradition of giving you nothing to work with. You know, there's no indication of what you need to do to open a file or to save it or to copy text. You need to be given an explanation first of how to get yourself into insert mode to actually start writing things. But luckily, with tools like this, you can actually fire up VimTutor. And what VimTutor does is it basically opens up a text file in Vim. But this text file tells you how to use Vim and how to start navigating. And as you work through it, you slowly learn the commands, and you sort of move through, you find out how to edit the text, how to rapidly move around your document, how to select large sections of it, and so on. And so this means that you can get all of that information. You can make that tool become this sort of reflex part of you where the actions are intuitive and you are not spending your time fighting with the tool. It's there and it's naturally becoming a part of you and helping you do your job. Now, one thing I will say is, who finds the command line exciting? Good, good. Okay. Now, on the off chance that you didn't put your hand up and you don't necessarily find the idea of, you know, running VimTutor the best way to learn Vim, you can also use this. So you can go to vimadventures.com, and what you get, I love this so much. This is like one of the first times that they asked for a credit card to buy the game, and I was just like, I don't care, put it in. Yes, I'm buying this. So you control the cursor, and you move around this world, exploring it, basically having your little top-down Zelda-like RPG adventure. And as you move around, what happens is that you talk to various people and you collect various keyboard commands. And you use those commands to navigate further, to solve puzzles, to open chests, to collect keys, and so on. And it's just, I mean, if that doesn't convince you to learn Vim properly, then we're done. Okay. Now, once you have your editor in place, and you have this tool as a part of you, one of the things that you need to do is you need to have deliberate practice. So a lot of us are very used to learning on the job and just getting the skills that you need by way of doing projects inside of those areas. However, to really master the craft, you need to make time to specifically repeat actions and to do training for yourself. This probably shouldn't be too hard of a message because all of you are here at this conference right now, so you obviously value investing in your education. So, okay. Yes, okay. So this is Uma Thurman's arm from Kill Bill. And the reason we're using this is because there's a scene in one of the Kill Bill films, sort of an excellent training montage, where one of the things she has to do is she has to repeatedly punch this wooden board, and she does it by keeping her fist or her hand just this far away from the board and just punching from that distance. And she punches and she punches and she punches, and she eats rice and she kills a load of people, and then at one point they get to refer back to this because she uses this practice to basically punch her way through and escape, and it's all very exciting. So if you haven't seen it, then you need to go and watch that to understand. But this this is a sort of a thing taken from martial arts called a kata. So this is the idea of doing a deliberate and controlled and repeated exercise. So when you see people doing the kind of, the sequence of 2 punches and some kicks or some specific movements, then this is a kata. And the idea of doing this is that you take something, you take a small, simple problem, and you repeat it until you no longer really need to actively think about it. So the idea here is when you need to fire up a unit test, for example, you don't spend any time thinking to yourself, oh yeah, where do I get PHP spec from? Or how do I configure, let's say, Selenium? Or how do I connect to the MySQL database? These things are now just automatic reflexes that you can apply, and you can get on to solving the new and interesting problems. So one of the ways, and this is not in any way related to job adverts that say they are looking for code ninjas or rock stars. This is hopefully a less cringeworthy way of referring to martial arts in code. Now, there are 2 links here that you can look up, and also some other sites that I can share with you later, that talk about the idea of the code kata. So the code kata, do I have an example? Yes, I do. Oh, good. It's almost like I knew what I wanted when I wrote these slides. Okay, so the code kata is the idea of taking a small, simple problem that should take you somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes and solving that problem. So the example here is the string calculator from the TDD kata. And it's a very simple problem, almost trivial, but the idea is that you do this, you solve this problem, then you delete the code, and then the next night you come back and you solve the same problem again. And you just keep doing this until all of the simple mechanics of how you write a test, how you go about digesting the problem and thinking about it in a test-driven development methodology, those things simply become second nature, and you can apply them in real-life situations. So one of the things that is fun just to set up for something like this is I wrote a little script when I was trying this myself that just uses the iNotify library on Linux to sit there and watch my directory and run my unit test so that I get immediate feedback as well. So when you want to do the red-green refactor process, then this means that you have in one terminal just your unit test sitting there, and whenever it detects a change on the file system, it just reruns the test. So as soon as you say something, you get immediate feedback on the actions that you've taken. One of the other sites that's quite good for this as well is Project Euler. And that basically is a long series of maths problems that you can solve and use various coding methodologies to solve those problems. One of the ways of approaching this is to challenge yourself to pick one of the simple problems and solve it. And then the next day you come back and you deliberately solve the same problem again, but you make sure that you use a different methodology to go about solving it. So if you were calculating prime numbers, and let's say you solved it in an iterative way the first time, then this time you go in and you solve it in a recursive way. Then the next time you go in and you look up the sieve of Aristophanes and work out how to apply that in your code. And explore all these different solutions of the same problem so that when it comes to solving these in real life, you are equipped with that array of solutions and you know the right one to apply in your given situation. Okay. We've got a tool, we've spent some time practicing with it, so now it's time to become a master of one of these particular areas. Yoda, yes, good, okay. So Yoda is our Jedi master. And what I want to talk about in terms of mastering craft is how we define this. So whilst I didn't actually introduce myself, I work at Google, if that wasn't clear from the t-shirt. But before I worked at Google, I worked for Invika and therefore Sensio Labs over in the UK. And I was introduced to this by our training manager over there, Marcelo. And this is what we used internally to define your skill levels in various areas. Now, the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition gives you a very clear definition of what these particular items mean. So a novice would be, let's say we're talking about Composer. Then a novice would be, you have heard about Composer and you went to a conference talk about it and you saw someone use it and you know where the website is. A beginner then is someone who has used Composer in a couple projects. They're comfortable going along to the site, following the instructions. They know how to get things working if they read the documentation, but they don't necessarily know the ins and outs of why they're doing this or how to optimize a particular thing. Now, competent is actually where you want to aim to be with most of your skills. So it feels like, oh, well, wait a minute, I'm only in the middle of this scale, why should I be aiming at that? Competent means exactly what it says. It means that you are used to using this tool on a day-to-day basis, you are comfortable with applying it in the situations that you need, you understand why it's doing certain things and can make a choice without kind of saying, should I be pinning this to a particular version of my dependency, or should I be applying some kind of range? What does it mean for the people who are using the library that I'm creating? Proficient, then. The difference between proficient and expert is an interesting one. Proficient is where you're at the level where you should be the senior person with that particular knowledge. So if it's Composer, then you're the project lead and you have done a number of Composer installations, you've written a number of files, you maintain a number of libraries on GitHub, and you know the dependency problems that people may have when they come to you. You're aware of how to handle making sure that the upstream and the downstream dependencies all work correctly. Now, when you get to expert level though, expert means that there is nothing higher. Okay, it's the sort of level 5 because there's nowhere to go beyond that. So for Composer, it means that you are Igor or Jordi and you wrote the tool and no one else knows it better than you. One of the interesting things here though is when we talk about an expert is also someone who will make whatever they're doing look like magic, because they will immediately jump to some kind of highly optimized solution and it will not be clear how they got there. So if inside of your group or company or organization or project, you map out skills like this, one of the things to understand is that an expert is someone you want when you need to immediately fix a problem or you need to deal with, maybe lay some foundations. If you need to teach people how to use a tool, an expert is not the right person to do it. Because an expert will often show people this really advanced knowledge, but will not give them the foundations to understand how they should be applying it. And you lead to this kind of cargo cult mentality where people immediately apply the shortcut rather than going down the correct path first and understanding why they're doing it. So if you want to teach people, then you want to find someone who is at a proficient level because they're more likely to provide the explanation along with the highly optimized solution. There's also a similar thing here. So I'll share these slides afterwards. So there is a link that I'm not expecting you to read currently on the slide, but it will be clickable in the PDF. Now, this is the 7 stages of expertise in software engineering. And this is very similar to the Dreyfus model, but something I liked about this is it helps explain the kind of the upper level and the lower level and the motivations that you might be feeling as you move through those particular stages. So the idea here is that at the top there's this difference between a master, who is the person that can immediately solve the problems, who when you're having some kind of problem on your project, this is the consultant that you want to bring in for a day because that time will be worth the money and they will get things fixed. But then you move to the step beyond that, the researcher, where the researcher is actually less interested in solving problems and more interested in pushing the art forward, in finding some kind of new tool or tweaking an existing solution. So who in here considers themselves a scientist? Yes? Okay, in which case, I apologize, I'm not even going to call this a graph. It's more like a line that we are going to use. It does not have measurements or axes. So far, no one has thrown anything at me when I've sort of put this up and claimed it's a graph, but I still feel guilty. So the idea here is that we are measuring the sort of the stage that you're passing through along the axis here, and your productivity up this way. I don't know what productivity is measured in. Maybe in cups of coffee or lines of code. So the idea here is that at the beginning, you're at a low level of productivity. And as this kind of innocent novice who is just exposed to the technology, you have this sort of enthusiasm and this kind of naivety of just going in and coding stuff and seeing what works. When you actually get to stage 3, there's a slight dip in productivity, because this is the stage where you've started to understand more about the area that you're getting into, and you realize just how much you don't know. And you start to become a little paralyzed by the kind of, oh, I'm just going to fire up the framework this way, but oh, no, wait a minute, maybe that's not very inefficient, that's inefficient. What I should actually do is do this. So you end up spending more time exploring the solutions rather than actually solving the problem. And then once you go into the later stages, your productivity ramps right up until you hit the researcher level, where the motivation to actually solve problems tails off. So the productivity goes down, but they're still very valuable people to have if you want to advance the state of those particular tools. Right. So now, we did a little bit of measuring. We measured the sort of the skill level that people were at. But this is a difficult thing to do. Measuring what matters is something that people often get very wrong. And one of the things I want to say about this is what you should try and do is measure systems. If you try and apply metrics to people, then people will realize that you're applying metrics to them, and they will try and do things to change and to try and win that game. An example of this is stack ranking. Who knows what stack ranking is? Ah, wow, okay, well, I'm glad it's not that popular. The very early definition of stack ranking, and a kind of brutal one, is the idea that you take all of your employees and you rank them in order of value. So you basically have, I have 100 employees and I rank them from most valuable down to least valuable. And then what I do is I simply fire the bottom 30% of them, because they're the underperforming ones. I'm left with this kind of cream of the crop at the top. Now, the problem with stack ranking is if you apply something like that within a company, then in theory, if you look at it purely as a sort of an open system, this should work, right? I mean, certain people provide more value in the company than others. That's simply an operation of the fact that some people are more skilled at certain things. And to say that doesn't happen would be slightly dishonest. But when you do stack ranking, what happens is that people start to understand that they are now competing against each other. And there have been stories of larger companies where stack ranking has been used, where what would actually happen is teams would realize that their ranking was below another one. So this team would come to them and say, ask for help on a particular project. Team B has something that they know would help Team A, but they know if they help Team A, then Team A is going to stay ahead of them in the ranking. So instead, they keep that information to themselves and make sure that their own ranking can stay sort of above the danger point. So it doesn't help. It doesn't help push the organization forward. It means that people are chasing the individual metric for themselves. Another story I heard from Kevin Henney was a good one, which was, who measures code coverage? Yeah? Come on, everybody's hand should be going up. Everybody does unit testing? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Right, well, you'll like this story then, because this is about why code coverage is actually a bad metric to use. Now, what they had was, they were very proud. They had their continuous integration system. They had code coverage being measured in that. And they had they had it as a departmental key performance indicator, was the code coverage on various areas of the code. And that was tied to developers' bonuses. So if code coverage went up, your bonus went up. And if code coverage went down, your bonus went down. On the whole, this seems like it would be straightforward, right? This would encourage people to put more tests and get more coverage in the code. What actually happened was they had a large legacy system as well that did have some tests over it. But what it meant was that if you went into the legacy code and realized that there was some kind of hideous bug in there, but there was currently a test that covered that old code, your choices were fix it, work out how to test it correctly, spend all this time dealing with a bug that wasn't actually part of the project, or just ignore it and leave the old test there. Or even worse, just write really bad tests just to get coverage up that just literally runs through the code but doesn't actually verify anything. And so on the whole, whenever you are setting some kind of metric, the key thing to do here is to understand that a metric is a way of measuring your progress towards a goal. So what you need to do with something like code coverage is measure code coverage when you are trying to change code coverage and reach a particular point. When you reach a particular point with it, you can stop measuring code coverage and you can focus on something else, like branch coverage, or actually doing more in-depth reviews of the tests that you're putting in place. Okay. This should hopefully be an easy one for people then. Who recognizes the legs? Yes, someone say, I think I know portal. I wanted to hear portal. So this is Shell from the, or Shell from the Portal games. Now, Portal comes from Valve Software. And what Valve Software did is conveniently leaked their employee handbook on a forum. Now, one of my backup plans for this talk is if things aren't going well, then we can just follow this link and read the handbook, because the handbook is amazing. I am a massive Valve fanboy. I have a ridiculous library of Steam games I never have time to play. But this handbook is sort of beautifully written and illustrated and explains the kind of things you can expect on your first day as an employee to Valve. It talks about the layout of the office, your training programs, and the kind of people that they look for. And the way they define this is T-shaped people. So this is this idea that you have a broad range of skills that you are, have a basic level of understanding, but then you have a couple areas where you have this deep level of expertise. So the particular story for me in this one is I actually really learned to appreciate this when I had realized that I thought project management was easy. So I had worked with a number of project managers, and as far as I could tell, what they did was spend time updating things in spreadsheets and bothering me with stupid questions. So when it came to a small project where all of our project managers were very busy, and my manager came to me and said, well, this is straightforward enough. What if you do the project management as well as doing the lead developer role? And I naively said, well, I know how to use spreadsheets, so this is going to be easy. 3 weeks in, I wanted to kill myself because it was turning into a disaster, and I realized that the problem was I had just worked with really good project managers who made everything look like all they were doing was updating a spreadsheet, when actually there was a whole load more going on in the background. So with respect to this, what I would say is, whatever area of the business you are in, then get experience in the other areas of the business. So if you have a support department in your company, then go and sit with the support department for a little while. Hear how they take calls from customers. See if you can answer a support ticket online. If you have a QA department, then go and sit with them while they're testing things. If you have designers, go and talk to the designers. If you have sales and marketing people, then go find out about some of the fascinating things about how you invest in advertising and the investment that you need to put in, the cost of acquiring a customer. Having all of this stuff makes you a much better component in the system as a whole, because you start to understand how your interactions affect the other members of the team, and you can start tailoring your behavior to make sure that you give them the things that they need. Okay. Let's see. You guys all look about like you should be able to get this next one. So, a little tip here. If you're not the smartest person in the room, you're probably not learning anything. So, I have messed my slides up, but let's see. Okay, who recognizes the head? Doom. Okay, cool. So this is a demon from Doom, one of the I think one of the Kako demons actually. And there's this blog entry from Brian Hook, and he is, again, this is an interesting article where he talks about how he went along to work for id Software, or ID Software. I've never actually been entirely sure which way I should say that. Anyway, he came in and joined the company and was admittedly quite arrogant. He thought he was going to join id Software and he was going to turn things around. He was going to make a difference. He was going to show everyone there what an incredible programmer he was. And he probably is an incredible programmer. But when you're up against people like John Carmack, then the bar is set relatively high. And he found that he was having real problems living up to the expectations that he had set himself. It got to the stage where every day he was coming into the office early, he was staying really late, and he was still not hitting the goals that he had set himself. So what he realized was that being around all these other people who he felt were so much better than him and so much faster, once he just accepted that there will always be someone who is more skilled than you, and he set his sights at a more realistic level, suddenly he was achieving so much more. And then he was able to start moving things up as he went along. So the idea there is really when you come to a conference like this and you find that you're sitting next to someone who wrote their own framework or wrote the book on testing something, and you feel like you're never going to achieve that, then just accepting that actually what you can do is learn a huge amount from them, and that you probably have some areas where you have a deeper level of skill than they do, then you're going to be a lot happier. So one of the other things to illustrate this is to take a look at some of the stuff that John Carmack has done. Who here can write C code? Yeah? Okay, everyone look at who has their hands up. Right? I'm going to show you some C code, and if you don't understand it, you can ask these people to explain it to you. Okay? This should be simple, right? It's only a couple lines. I mean, it's probably it's even got comments as well, so this should be fine. It's self-documenting. So what happened was the source code for Quake 3 was released by id Software, and a friend of mine who I used to work with, he now works for Imagination Technologies, but he has always been really into 3D graphics and ran a forum where they were going through the code, looking at various things, and they found this, which is a fast inverse square root function. Now, this is an important operation because the inverse square root allows you to do things like find the normal to a vector in 3D space. This is important when you want to do things like bounce a grenade off a wall, or calculate the sort of the light rays that are scattering when they hit the surface. And the problem is that finding the inverse square root is a pretty expensive operation. Now what's going on here, obviously, is who knows the Newton-Raphson method for finding a square root? Okay, cool. So, in which case, I can just hand-wave my way through this, and none of you will know whether I'm getting this right or not. Finding the square root properly is hard, okay? It's an expensive problem. So obviously, within engineering, there's a good approximation of finding what is almost the square root, but it's a lot cheaper. And what that involves is basically making a guess at what you think the square root should be, and then running it through, seeing if it matches your original value, and then refining your guess, and just repeating that. So you can run through a number of steps to get closer to the square root. What this code does, this bit here is this magical hex constant, and this has something to do with the fact that it's running on a 32-bit x86 processor, and it allows you to do a sort of bitwise shift of the value and makes a relatively good first guess at the square root. I don't know. You know what? Every so often I go through and I spend some time looking at this code and reading the article, and you get that moment where you're just kind of like, yes, yes, yeah, yeah. Oh, no, it's gone again. Okay, so this was taken straight out of the source code. And my friend thought, well, this is pretty good because, so the important thing about this is it's really efficient and really fast, and one of the reasons that the Quake library was the Quake engine was so quick. So there's a lot of speculation about where this came from. So my friend thought, well, what if I just email John Carmack and ask, what, that couldn't hurt. So he emails John Carmack and then forgets about it, and then he gets a reply back from John Carmack later saying, oh, flattered that you thought that I wrote this. I remember seeing it in the code, but I didn't write it. I think it might have been one of my colleagues. So, okay. Has another email address for a colleague, so sends an email to this guy. And the guy's like, oh, hey, John, nice to hear from you again. Yeah, this is a bit of a blast from the past. I remember seeing this as well. I did some similar stuff for some, fluid dynamic simulations when I was in Sweden, but no, this isn't my code. I think maybe it was one of the guys from 3DFX. So he gets another email address. So he emails this guy from 3DFX, who is now at NVIDIA. And that comes by, and the guy's like, oh, yeah, that does look familiar. I think I saw something like that in some MIT documentation at some point. But no, and I remember this going into the code, and I think I may have tweaked the hex constant a little bit, but no, I didn't write it. So it turns out that inside of the source code, there's just this function where no one really knows where it came from. So the lesson here is don't necessarily feel bad about copying and pasting something off of Stack Overflow, even if you don't quite understand it, because basically that's what John Carmack does as well. And that's the link to the article as well, where there's a far better description of how it's actually working in the email thread as well, if you want to go through and read that. Okay, that's the hard part out of the way, so we can go back to the more fluffy keynote-related stuff. Adjusting your attitude. This could be a tricky one, actually. Does anyone see this? No? Who's seen The Big Lebowski? Yeah, okay. So this is the dude's sweater. So the dude has a very laid-back attitude to life. It's very difficult to make him angry or wild or even really to get him to care about anything. But the point I want to make about this here is that a lot of us are doing this because we love doing it. Like, I have this problem where I forget to take my vacation time. And so then at the end of the year, I end up just taking the whole of December off or something because I need to use it. But one of the things I found about this is I had a while back, I had a sort of very intense project, and I was feeling pretty burned out, so I just took 2 weeks of vacation. At the end of it, we had reached a milestone, got it delivered, and I was just kind of like, I don't want to touch the computer for a little while. I'm just going to sit on the sofa in my pants and watch Buffy episodes. And I did that for 5 days before I found that I just had to pick up a computer and start coding something, find some side project or some problem I wanted to solve. And it's kind of like, wow, I'm actually really grateful that people want to pay me to do this, because this is like a disease. I can't stop myself from wanting to write code. But that means people get very invested in what they're doing. And being passionate and authoritative about these things is not the same as being an angry asshole. Now, I want to show you some excerpts from a mailing list on an open source project that some of you may have used. So this is just from a message, someone submitting a patch somewhere. Yeah. Oh, okay. Ouch. Yeah. At least they self-censored themselves there, so it's not too unpleasant. Anyone know what project this might be? Yeah, this is the Linux kernel. And now, Linus has talked and written about this a fair bit as well. He refers to this attitude as this is management by purple. So this is a kind of a Finnish concept that is like very similar to sort of like drill instructors and favors the idea that rather than reaching a sort of consensus decision where you all talk and hold hands and everybody is happy, it favors kind of having the decisive, quick action and decisions made, and respect is something that is earned, and that because people are passionate about the things that they are doing, then naturally people get very emotional and can get very kind of over-exaggerate insults and so on. There are some other ones that he's written as well, which even, I don't know, this one I was like, yeah, I can put this in slides. There are some of the others where I'm like, I can't actually put that on a screen in front of people. So the issue here is that, and Linus has admitted this, that it makes kernel development quite an unfriendly, and forbidding place to get involved in. And I guess the issue here is I would be personally put off contributing to the kernel because of this kind of concern that if my patch isn't good enough, I'm going to get ripped to shreds by the owner of the project. Now, maybe I'm the one who's wrong here because I haven't created the most popular operating system in the world. So he may well have a point that this is a successful way to deal with it. But one of the things is it leads to this kind of feeling. So Elizabeth works for GitHub, and this is a blog she posted where it's kind of, she's comparing it to this grocery store that's near her house, that's kind of dark and dingy, and she has no particular like animosity or hatred towards it, but because it makes her feel uncomfortable, she just doesn't go there. So that's the issue with this kind of behavior on projects, is maybe things are working out for you and you are getting things done successfully, but you don't necessarily know about the contributors who are just never coming to you. They're not even complaining to you that your attitude is unpleasant or that they worry. They are just never appearing. You never know if those people were actually out there and would have contributed if you had just made a more welcoming atmosphere for them. Okay, but one of the things that I wanted to say in sort of contrast to that, though, is this does not mean that you have to turn into some kind of featureless, inoffensive, totally grey sort of blob where you never express your own personal opinions, where you never do get worked out about something. So it is perfectly acceptable to get enthusiastic about ideas, to be really vehement that you don't want to accept a certain type of thing. So I picked this for this one. This might be a little tricky. Anyone recognize the beard? No? Okay, this beard is from Brian Blessed. As references, Brian Blessed was the, in Flash Gordon, he's the hawk man in there, and he is known for being very big and very loud, okay? But at the same time, it's somehow impossible to ever be offended by Brian Blessed, even though he has this incredible volume and could shout over everyone in this room. Even me, mic'd up, if he started talking at the back, then I would just be drowned out. But the point is, he does this without being a kind of frightening, intimidating character. He is just a very strong and powerful personality. So some of the tips I have for dealing with that are, firstly, to attack ideas and not people. That's definitely an important step. So you can call out someone's code as being utter crap, but you should probably not make a value judgment on whether you think that person is crap just because they wrote some bad code. Because I have had similar things where, this was actually back in the day when we were using CVS for our version control, and we had a new starter, and we were looking through some of the existing code, and there was a really obvious problem with it, and we spotted it, and it was kind of like, that should be fixed now. Whoever wrote this is an idiot. Bring up the CVS log and let's take a look at who committed this. And it was me. So don't necessarily, well, that said, if I did that, I probably am an idiot for blaming that person. If you're a manager, who's a team lead or in a similar kind of sort of position where you have people report to you, right? So when you have bad news to deliver, and you will have bad news to deliver, then make sure you deliver it as soon as possible. It's basically like ripping a plaster off. You want to make that happen as soon as you can. The longer you leave it, the more it's going to build up, and the worse the consequences of delivering this are going to be when you finally get around to doing it. The other thing then as well is learning to say no. This is one of the ones where I put this in here as a kind of aspirational, if anyone has learned how to say no, then please come and find me afterwards and explain how to do it. Because I still have this problem where I just say yes to everything. It's kind of like, yes, I'll give this talk. Yes, I'll come to Germany and meet with a whole bunch of partners. Yes, I'll also deliver that documentation that I promised. Yes, I was up until 3 in the morning getting all of this finished. After I gave this talk somewhere else before, a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, I have actually worked out how to do this. All you need to do is wait until you're 50 years old, and then it just comes naturally. So I couldn't work out whether that made me feel better or not about just accepting that you just need to wait and then it'll happen. Okay, another thing that you can do to create this kind of culture as well. We had, in the place I used to work, we had what we called DFQs, and this stood for dumb fucking questions. What this meant was, at the start of a project, we would have this sort of project kickoff meeting, you'd get everyone together, you'd all be talking through, and then at the end of the session, it was asked, does anyone have any DFQs? This was the point where even if you had spent half of the meeting asleep and the other half of the meeting playing Flappy Bird, then you could ask the question that, the kind of like, what project is this again? No one would be angry because it was defined as this safe space of kind of ask these questions now, because if we get to the, like the night before launch and you're suddenly going, oh, shouldn't we have PCI compliance? Then that's going to be a disaster. So make that safe space where people can ask these questions without fear of retribution, without anyone kind of getting angry at them because they weren't paying attention. Another way that you can do this as well is, if you find that your developers are naturally quite quiet and reserved and shy and introverted, which I imagine probably applies to a lot of teams, then it can be difficult to get sort of ideas and feedback to come out of them naturally. One of the things you can do is just put a really bad idea out there first, because people are a lot happier to attack and criticize a bad solution rather than just kind of starting from a green field. So if you kind of say, oh yeah, I think what we should do, or if, let's say we have an e-commerce project coming up, what should we use for our e-commerce project? Then people are going to be like, well, but if you come out and say, we have this e-commerce project, It's a multi-million euro thing. So I was going to set up a WordPress install and find a shopping cart plugin, and I thought we could do it like that. You will get some immediate feedback. And people will start explaining why that's wrong. And when they start explaining why it's wrong, they will also start moving on to what they think the right solution would be. And you can draw out the ideas like that. Okay. Did I actually have a... yes. Yeah, I did have a body part for this one. So the community. Okay, yeah, we're just about finished with our transformations here. So we'll speed up for this last bit here. Who recognizes the arm? It should be an easy one.
Iron Man?
Yeah, but which film? Any guesses? No, okay, so this is Iron Man's arm from the Avengers film. Now the specific reason for this is that in the Iron Man films, Tony Stark is kind of the epitome of the standalone, super arrogant genius who does everything by himself. Part of the sort of story arc of the Avengers is the fact that he has to learn how to work as part of a team. And he finds that actually it's not just his skills alone that are going to make everything work. He does have that kind of happy thing of finding that if you work together, then you get to achieve a whole lot more than you would have done as an individual. Most of us are probably not day-to-day trying to stop an alien invasion, or maybe you are and you're just so good at it, I have never noticed. So you can be a hero. We don't have to worry about the no-capes thing from before. You can do this, but you're not doing it by yourself. So I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that people can do to contribute. Dan mentioned this yesterday in his keynote as well, just the things that you can do to make open source work are the things that you can do to make your community work as well. So it is not just writing code. It's all of these other things. So the first way I got into actually putting some code into the PHP core was by going along to a test fest that had been organized. And in there, someone showed me just how simple it was to write the PHP tests. And so we did that, and we all sat together. We got code coverage up, hopefully in a good way. And then other things, just kind of going to the user groups, submitting bug reports. We didn't have too many beers last night, so I actually remember this conversation. Ask Jam about submitting bug reports, he has a good story. But yes, just doing all of this stuff, and things like, this is, within PHP, this is you can't see my shadow, this is an important one, building the release candidates as well. Because if you do that, if you just build it and run it on your machine, then that's a valuable data point to find out whether everything is okay on your particular hardware. Okay, the final body part then. We've done a lot of good stuff to our developer, but honestly, they still don't look very happy. So, let's change that. So really, do I even have to ask? Or, yeah. So this is the Joker's smile. So really, like I was alluding to with the fact that I have a personal problem of not being able to stop coding, then for a lot of us, this isn't just a kind of clock in at 9 o'clock, clock out at 5 o'clock, and forget about everything when you walk out the door. It's more than that. It is generally a kind of a choice, either a choice that you have deliberately made, or a choice that afflicts you and you're just finding a way to get paid for the thing that you would do anyway. But that's really what I wanted to try and say out of all of this is, if you're in this particular industry, then your skills are generally in demand and you have a choice about what you do and where you work. So try and make sure that whatever it is, you are actively enjoying it. Could it be you? I think they pull off their trousers pretty well. If you think it could, then, well, or if you think it couldn't, come and talk to me as well. I'm going to be around all of today. I think there are drinks tonight, or if I'll find drinks somewhere tonight. I'll be there. I'll also be around in the breaks if you want to talk to me. I just wanted to say thank you very much for listening to me this morning. That is the joined in link, and I would love to hear feedback or comments or questions or anything you have. Likewise, find me on Twitter or just find me around. So thank you very much.